This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief live here on Blood Red, the first one of the season. Well, 3 points for Liverpool in the opening day of the Premier League at Carrow Road. Matt, in terms of opening day in the Premier League, you've got a clean sheet, your attacking players coming up with goals. I guess it doesn't really get any better than that, does it?
No, it's the perfect start, I think, for Liverpool in terms of, all of those things that you say. I thought there was nobody that really struggled. It was a fairly routine win. I think we saw last night, obviously, with Arsenal and Brentford, the sort of difficulties of going away from home with the fans, a newly promoted team and all the rest of it. But Liverpool just sort of looked at a very, very comfortable sort of version of themselves. I think, obviously, we'll get on to the talking points, but I think, the fact that Virgil van Dijk has come through and looked as good as he did and looked fit and looked ready, that's obviously big for Liverpool. But yeah, I think to get off to a win, start so well, be clinical, look at a lot more like the Liverpool that we're used to seeing and have become accustomed to, rather than the sort of patched up version that we saw last season. I think, it can only be positive. It's a perfect start, obviously away from home. Next week, back to Anfield, and the one after that is Chelsea. So they needed a big start. They needed to win that one. I think the one thing we do know this season is that the title race is going to be really, really competitive. You can't afford to drop points. Obviously, Manchester United have already won, and I know it's the opening day, but it doesn't matter. You've got to go and match their result, and that's what Liverpool have done there. Yeah,
as you say, there was pressure on them right from the off, really, with the results earlier in the day. But in terms of the match this evening, only one place to start, really, and that's got to be Mohamed Salah. 2 assists and a goal after a dry spell in pre-season. No goals during the tours of Switzerland and France, but he's come up front today and looks, set to attack that golden boot once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just one of those things that you sort of become used to and don't particularly talk about a huge amount because it's just Mohamed Salah. That's what he does. But I think we should be talking about it. I think it was, as you say, a brilliant performance from him. I thought even, before the goal, he played really, really well, really looked unselfish. I know, obviously, towards the end of the game there, he tried to pass to Mane when he should have had a shot, really. And I think that sort of puts to bed the sort of myth about all of the sort of thing of them being, having fallen out and stuff like that. Again, it got mentioned on Sky Sports on the commentary there. But yeah, I thought it was a brilliant performance from him. He will always want to get those goals, but I just thought that the passing, the creativity from him, the pressing, it was just so high intensity, high energy from him. He just looked really, really confident, really comfortable. And I think it was helped, to be honest, a lot by the players around him being so good as well. I think, obviously Diogo Jota brings a lot to the table. Sadio Mane looked really sharp. And I think between the three of them, they really pressed high up the pitch. They did all of the things. And again, we say, Van Dijk makes a big impact. I think that sort of it helps in that regard as well. It helped Liverpool be a little bit further up the pitch. Mohamed Salah was getting the ball in those positions. And if you give him the ball enough times and stand off him as Norwich did at times, I think he's obviously only going to end up with one thing and one thing only, which is the ball being in the back of the net eventually. And that's how it was. So, yeah, it's a brilliant start from him. It goes without saying that obviously Liverpool need him to score as many goals as he possibly can this season. But I think, there'll certainly be Mane and Jota not a million miles behind him. I still think Salah will be the top scorer, but I think, he's going to have a bit more competition this season, let's say, than what he had last year.
Yeah, and there was what's really cool, maybe a cryptic tweet from his agent during that match, but that's perhaps a talking point for another time. He set up Jota and Firmino for a goal apiece. I mean, what did you make of their performances? And I guess it's a great problem for Klopp to have going into the next game. He can really flip a coin for which one he starts against Burnley.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's all about options, isn't it? It's about options all over the pitch. I think you go through this Liverpool team and there's not too many areas where he doesn't have options. I think obviously one of the left backs is injured, but the other one has done well. There's 2 centre backs on the bench there in Gomez and Konate, who've obviously not played at a single minute today, but you wouldn't be massively concerned if either of those two came in. And it's the same through the middle as well. I think obviously Salah and Mane can both play in that position, but it's going to be Jota or Firmino as long as they're fit and firing. And to be honest, I'd stick with Diogo Jota moving forward for next week. I thought he was really, really good whilst he was on the pitch. But the one thing you want is that strength in depth, isn't it? It's why most people would like Liverpool to go and get another one so that you can play maybe 4 and still have one on the bench, or you've you've got two on the bench, but certainly to have somebody as good as Roberto Firmino coming off the sidelines, I think was really important. I think it's important that he got his goal as well. I think that'll be something that he would have wanted to get out of the way early. I think the one thing you wouldn't have wanted to see was that Jota starts the season really well and Firmino struggles a little bit. Then there's all these conversations about, is it time for him to be moved on and all that sort of thing. What you want is all four of those forward players playing as well as they possibly can. And I think that's what we started to see there. I think Jota, for the first hour whilst he was on, was brilliant, pressing all of the things that Roberto Firmino does, and took the goal really well as well, actually. I think that the goalkeeper probably will feel he could have done a little bit better, but you've got to be in the right position. Bit of a snapshot, and I thought he took that really nicely. So, yeah, again, it's all positive. It's all good. Two players through the middle that Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool can pick from. I think, yeah, it's never going to be a bad thing.
You touched on it there, but I just wanted to go back into the depth in this squad, because there's been a lot of talk in this pre-season, maybe with just one signing through the door at Anfield, and you look at comparative squads to Chelsea, City, United, and there's been talk that we maybe don't have the kind of two starting 11s that they have. But there was that moment just after the hour mark where Firmino came on and Fabinho alongside him, and to be at that stage where you're away at a Premier League ground, comfortably winning and being able to bring on players of that calibre, it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah, and of course, Harvey Elliott was there. Thiago and Henderson weren't even there at all. I mean, you go through and there is a lot of depth, and I know it's something that Jurgen Klopp has spoken about a lot. Obviously, there's certain areas of the squad that need to be trimmed down. I think you can improve on certain backup options, but it is very, very difficult. And that's what Liverpool have said all summer long, is that if they're going to buy somebody else, it has to be a really special player. It has to be the perfect player to bring in, because there's no point doing it unless that's the case. I mean, you only have to sort of look at someone like Takumi Minamino, who had a brilliant pre-season, looked absolutely superb on Monday night at Anfield against Osasuna, and then today doesn't even get a minute, and no one's really considered it or talked about it, because it's just a given, isn't it? When you've got Firmino and Jota, as we've spoken about, there's just so many options, and there is always going to be quality in reserve. I mean, the only question you've got is, obviously, Naby Keita played today, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain played today. How long are they going to be fit? How long are they going to be firing? We don't know that. There's certain areas of the squad that could very quickly look a lot weaker than what they are now, but that's what makes it so tricky, isn't it? You can't second guess these injuries. You can't, guess how many games Keita is or isn't going to play. But if he's fit and he's ready and he's playing like this, there's no reason to go and get another midfielder. I think what you'd say is you just don't want that question mark over certain areas of the squad. So as much as it looks superb on paper at the moment, and certainly, for the first game, it was brilliant, I think I'd still be looking at trying to bring in one more, trying to move on a few of the players. Obviously, Nat Phillips wasn't in the squad today. Xherdan Shaqiri, it looks like they're going to be moved on. But I think that there is space for one more, certainly, and it's something I'd like to see Liverpool do.
Well, all the attention would have been on the attacking players today, but important to just talk about the clean sheet as well. Obviously, a big moment from Alisson there at the end, but one of the best goalkeepers in the world, if not the best, in the new contract. We don't really need to talk about him. I know we're very lucky to have him at Anfield for the many years to come. But a couple of players in defence I do want to pick up on. Obviously, Van Dijk was his first start since that injury at Everton at the beginning of last season. Wasn't too troubled today, was he? Seemed to, for him, it was a great game to get back in, 90 minutes under his belt, and not too much to do.
Yeah, I think it was the perfect game to bring him back, actually. I mean, earlier in the summer, I wasn't 100% convinced that we'd see him maybe until the international break and maybe give somebody else a go for the first couple of games. But I think, what we see from him there is a perfect sort of performance, really, to ease himself back in. He didn't have a huge amount to do. The stuff that he did do, he was able to do fairly comfortably. He obviously knows the positions. He knows where to put himself, so he doesn't have to run. He doesn't have to turn and those sorts of things. We never really see him sort of put under huge amounts of pressure, even when he's not been injured. So I think it was a good one to bring back. I mean, Jurgen Klopp would never really admit this, but I think it's probably one that Liverpool were confident enough that if they did concede a goal, they could probably go and score two against Norwich and win it that way. So it was a pretty perfect game to bring him back. And I think there's probably one reason and one reason alone that he has been brought back in straight away. And I mentioned it before, it's that game on match day 3 against Chelsea. I think if Van Dijk has got through this and he's fine and he's okay, he can do the same next week I think it's a massive boost for Liverpool in what will be an enormous match, I think, at Anfield against Chelsea. So, yeah, to have him up to speed for that, I think is probably the reasoning behind him coming straight back in today. But, yeah, if anything was to go wrong, as we said before, the depth is there. It's not going to be a massive issue. So, yeah, pretty perfect for Liverpool, pretty perfect for Van Dijk. Didn't have to do a great deal, didn't have to do much defending or anything like that. But as I said before, I think that the whole pressing, the whole system, it just looked a lot more complete with him in that team. And I think it's a massive thing. I mean, you mentioned before the signings that some other teams have made this summer, but I think if Liverpool spent 100 million on one player, I don't think he'd make as much of an impact as what Van Dijk has. No,
I don't think many would doubt that. Possibly another reason that Van Dijk was given the nod today was because on the left-hand side of the defence, Christoph Lucas is playing, obviously given the injury to Robertson. I don't think it's confirmed, but I mean, we're expecting him to be out till round about the international break, so possibly Burnley and Chelsea. We're going to have Lucas in for the next couple of games as well. But again, just final point here, but he wasn't too troubled, was he? Maybe caught on the ball once, but seemed to slot in quite well, offered something going forward, and he's got similar traits to Robertson, and maybe isn't too far away for someone that can come in and might be looking to get 15 games in the competition this year.
Yeah, I think he's the perfect sort of backup option in that he's not quite as good as what Andy Robertson is and not quite as sort of effective, but I think what he does give you is a lot of quality and a lot of stylistic sort of similarities to Robertson. I don't think you can get really a better understudy to Andy Robertson. I think for 70 minutes he was really, really good. I think the last 20 he looked a little bit tired, couldn't get up and down the pitch as much. We saw him switch off, as you say, to give that ball away late on in the game. And I think it was a really promising performance. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but he will get better. Obviously, it was his first Premier League start. He only played, I think, 6 minutes in total throughout the whole of last season. So it was a little bit of an unknown quantity. Obviously, he's impressed during pre-season, but to actually do it in a competitive game, I think is a big, big step forward. And I think it's just hugely important to have that as an option. Even once Robertson comes back, as you say, we expect him to miss the next couple of games. But even after that, you need to be able to give these players a little bit of a rest at times. It's not realistic for Andy Robertson to play another 38 games in the Premier League this season, having done it last season. You want to have the odd game where you can rotate. And I think, Norwich City is obviously one of the lesser teams, with all due respect to them. They've come up from the Championship. It's a team that Liverpool will expect to beat. And, if Norwich at Anfield later in the season, Klopp wants to give Andy Robertson a rest, you can bring him in, I think, Tsimikas, and not really feel too troubled. So, again, it's that squad depth, isn't it? We've mentioned it a few times already over the last few minutes, but it just really was a performance that I think would give you confidence. And I think over the past few seasons, there's sort of been players that Jurgen Klopp might change and bring in, and people would be a little bit worried as to what might happen. I think if you brought Kostas Tsimikas in over the course of this season, for any game really, but certainly sort of games at home in particular, or games against lesser opponents, I don't think anyone would have any concerns. I think we've seen all of what he's about. We've seen a lot of good things from him, really. And I think, as I say, to come in and have a player stylistically as similar as what Robertson is, but not quite the same quality, for a club like Liverpool that's not going to go out and spend 50 million on a backup player, I think it's almost the perfect balance for what you can get, really.
Absolutely. Well, 3 goals and 3 points for Liverpool to start the new Premier League season. Do stay with us here on Blood Red. We've got Jurgen Klopp's post-match press conference coming up any minute now. But until next time, bye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.